The alarm screamed through every corridor of Galactic Rim Station. Theta 9. Red lights flashed in patterns that meant the same thing in every language. Evacuate now. Minho ran through the chaos with practiced ease. He had been a cargo captain for 15 years, and station emergencies were nothing new. But this felt different. The crowds moved with real panic, not the organized rush of a drill. Around him, dozens of species pushed and shoved toward their designated evacuation zones. The insectoid Vrelnath clicked their mandibles in distress. The tall, gray-skinned Korthan bellowed orders to their groups. Even the usually calm Tithrani were moving faster than their 6 legs normally carried them. "Captain!" Yuna's voice crackled through his comm device. "The docking bay is getting crowded. We need to leave in the next 10 minutes or we'll be stuck." "I'm almost there," Minho replied, dodging a cart full of supplies that someone had abandoned in the middle of the corridor. "Get the engines warm." The station shook. Not the gentle vibration of ships docking, but a real tremor that made the walls groan. Somewhere far away, weapons fire lit up the black space outside. 2 massive fleets were approaching the station from different directions. The Vrelnath Hive and the Korthan Empire had finally taken their Cold War hot. And Theta 9 was right in the middle of their territory dispute. Minho reached the docking bay and felt relief wash over him. The wandering star sat there, solid and ready. She was not a pretty ship, not by anyone's standards. She was a cargo hauler with patched hull plating and engines that rattled when pushed too hard. But she was home, and she was fast enough when it mattered. He climbed aboard through the loading ramp, sealing it behind him. The ship's interior was cramped and cluttered with the usual mess of a working vessel. Tools lay scattered across the metal floor. Supply crates were strapped to the walls. It smelled like machine oil and recycled air. "Done. How are we looking?" Minho called out as he headed toward the bridge. "Engines are ready," came the engineer's quiet voice from somewhere below. "Fuel cells at 90%. We're good to go." Yuna appeared from the medical bay, wiping her hands on a cloth. She was young for a ship's medical officer, barely in her late 20s, but she had good instincts. "I packed extra supplies. If this turns into a shooting war, stations along the route might run short." Smart thinking. Minho dropped into the captain's chair and began running through the launch sequence. His fingers moved across the controls with muscle memory. "Let's get clear of this mess." The station shook again, harder this time. Through the viewport, Minho could see other ships launching in a desperate stream. Some were elegant diplomatic vessels. Others were battered freighters like his own. Everyone had the same idea: get away before the fleets arrived. "Captain." Yuna's voice had changed. Something was wrong. Minho looked up from his controls. Yuna stood at the cargo bay monitor, staring at the screen with wide eyes. "What is it?" I think there are children in cargo bay 3. Minho frowned and pulled up the camera feed on his console. The image was grainy, but clear enough. In the corner of the large cargo bay, 3 small shapes huddled together. They were Richthan, the reptilian species from the Cold Worlds. Even through the bad camera quality, Minho could see they were young. Very young. How did they get on our ship? Dahyun had climbed up from engineering, his face confused. "They must have been hiding when we loaded supplies yesterday." Yuna was already moving toward the cargo bay. "They're terrified." "Wait." Minho held up his hand. "The Richthan evacuation ships left an hour ago. These kids, they got left behind." The 3 of them stood in silence for a moment. Outside, another ship launched past their viewport. The station trembled again. Time was running out. "We need to go," Dohyun said quietly. "If we wait much longer, we'll be caught in the crossfire." Minho knew he was right. Every second of delay increased their danger. The logical thing, the smart thing, was to put the children outside and launch immediately. Someone else would find them. The station had security, evacuation protocols, backup plans, but as he watched the monitor, he saw the smallest child curl tighter against its siblings. They had brown-green scales and small horns just beginning to grow. The way they pressed together reminded him of frightened puppies. "Prep a medical scan," Minho said, "and find out what Richthan children eat. We're taking them." Yuna smiled and rushed off. Do-hyun raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He simply went back to engineering to make sure they had extra power for life support. It took 8 precious minutes to secure the children in the crew quarters and make sure they would not get hurt during launch. The smallest one, barely tall as Minho's knee, hissed and showed tiny teeth when Yuna approached. But she moved slowly, speaking in soft tones, and eventually managed to strap them into crash seats by the time Minho initiated launch. The station was shaking constantly. Weapons fire streaked across the view screen in bright lines. The Vrelmuth fleet had arrived on one side, massive organic ships that looked like flying insects. The Korthon fleet approached from the other direction, angular metal warships bristling with weapons. The Wandering Star lifted off with dozens of other vessels, all fleeing in different directions like seeds scattered by wind. Minho pushed the engines as hard as he dared, his hands steady on the controls despite his racing heart. Something exploded to their left. A small transport had not moved fast enough. Debris scattered across the black. Come on," Minho muttered, adjusting their trajectory. The station fell away behind them, and the warring fleets moved past on intercept courses. For one terrible moment, Minho thought they might target the fleeing civilian ships. Then they were past the danger zone, accelerating into clear space. Do-hyun exhaled slowly. "That was closer than I'd like," agreed. Minho kept his hands on the controls until they were well away from Theta 9. Only when the station was a small point of light. Behind them did he allow himself to relax. A Vrelmuth military ship appeared on their communication screen. Commander Velcros, his insectoid face filling the display. "Human vessel. We noticed you delayed your departure." "Engine trouble," Minho lied smoothly. Velcros tilted his head in that way his species did when confused. "Our sensors indicate you took on additional life forms. 3 juveniles. Not human. That's right. Explain. Why would you risk your vessel and crew for offspring not of your species?" The commander's mandibles clicked together. "This makes no logical sense." Minho looked at the monitor showing the cargo bay. The 3 Richthan children were no longer huddled in fear. Yuna sat with them now, trying to communicate with hand gestures and simple words. The smallest one, the one that had hissed, was reaching out to touch Yuna's hand. "Because they needed help," Minho said simply. Velcro stared at him through the screen. "Most peculiar," he said finally, and closed the connection. Minho leaned back in his chair and wondered what he had gotten himself into. 3 weeks to New Haven Station. 3 weeks with 3 alien children who spoke no common language, ate foods he did not have, and probably needed care he could not provide. Behind him, he heard the smallest child make a sound. Not a hiss this time. Something closer to a laugh. "Well," he said to his empty bridge, "let's figure this out." The first 3 days were the hardest. Yuna barely slept, spending every waking hour trying to understand what the Richthan children needed. She searched the ship's database for information about their species, finding only basic biological data. Richthan were cold-blooded reptilians who came from ice-covered worlds. They needed cooler temperatures than humans preferred. Their diet consisted of proteins and minerals that humans rarely carried on cargo ships. The children would not eat the food she offered. They huddled together in the corner of the crew quarters, their scales dull and their eyes wide with fear. The largest one, who Yuna started calling Sestith because of the sounds he made, would hiss whenever anyone came too close. The middle child, who had lighter scales and seemed female, stayed completely silent. The smallest one, the one with the tiny horns, would make sad chirping sounds that broke Yuna's heart. "They're starving," Yuna told Minho on the third day. Dark circles ringed her eyes. "I've tried everything in our food stores. They won't touch any of it." Minho rubbed his face. "What do Richthan children eat on their home worlds?" "The database says small frozen prey animals and mineral supplements." Yuna laughed without humor. "We don't exactly carry frozen mice on a cargo hauler." Dohyun appeared in the doorway, holding a small container. "Try this," he said quietly. He opened it to reveal a gray paste that smelled terrible. "I broke down some of our protein rations and mixed them with iron supplements and calcium powder. I cooled it to near freezing." Yuna took the container and returned to the children. She moved slowly, as she had learned to do. Quick movements scared them. She set the container on the floor and backed away. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Sessith, the brave one, crept forward. He sniffed the gray paste. His tongue, thin and forked, flickered out to taste it. He ate. The other two children watched him for a moment, then rushed forward. They ate like they were dying of hunger, which they probably were. Yuna felt tears on her cheeks and did not bother to wipe them away. "Good work," Minho told Dohyun, who just nodded and disappeared back into the engine room. The next challenge came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Threnix, an avian diplomat who had managed to board the Wandering Star during the evacuation chaos, observed the humans with increasing confusion. He was tall, covered in gray-blue feathers, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Why do you do this?" he asked Minho one day in the ship's small galley. "These children are not your responsibility. They are not even your species." Minho poured himself coffee, the cheap recycled kind that tasted like burnt dirt. "They're children. They need help, but you gain nothing from this." Threnix tilted his head. "You have delayed your cargo delivery. You are using extra resources on life support and food preparation. You risk contamination from species-specific diseases. All for juveniles that provide no benefit to you or your genetic line." "Not everything is about benefit," Minho said. Threnix made a sound like wind through leaves. It might have been a laugh. "How strange you humans are." But as the days passed, Yuna noticed Threnix watching them more carefully. He saw how she sat with the children for hours, teaching them simple words in Galactic Common. He watched Dohyun build a small sleeping area suited to their size, with cool gel pads that felt more like their home environment. He observed Minho adjust the ship's temperature to be cooler, even though it made the humans wear extra layers. By the end of the first week, the children had begun to trust them. Sessith no longer hissed when Yuna approached. The middle child, who they started calling Kreela, began making soft sounds back when they spoke to her. And the smallest one, little Chalk with his tiny horns, had started following Yuna around like a shadow. "Warm one," Chalk said one day, touching Yuna's hand. His scales were cool against her skin. "Is that what you're calling me?" Yuna smiled. "I suppose to you, I am warm." Chalk pressed his small head against her leg. Among his people, Yuna had learned this was a sign of trust and affection. The second week brought a new crisis. Kreela became sick. She stopped eating and lay curled in the corner, her scales turning an unhealthy gray color. Yuna worked frantically, trying every medical scan she had. But human medical equipment was not designed for Richthan biology. "I don't know what's wrong," Yuna told Minho, her voice shaking. "She has a fever, I think. But I don't know how to treat it. I don't even know what's normal for her species." Minho contacted every ship within communication range, searching for someone who knew about Richthan medicine. Most ignored his calls. A few responded with confusion about why he cared. Finally, a Tethrani merchant ship replied with basic information about Richthan immune responses. Armed with this new knowledge, Yuna prepared a treatment. She stayed awake for 42 hours straight, monitoring Krilla's condition, adjusting temperatures, providing hydration through methods she hoped were correct. Ambassador Threnix watched from the doorway, saying nothing. On the third day, Krilla's fever broke. She opened her eyes and made a soft, chirping sound. Sesseth and Chalk rushed to her side, nuzzling against their sister. Yuna collapsed in her chair, exhausted beyond words. "Remarkable," Threnix said quietly. "You stayed awake for almost 2 cycles. Why?" "Because she needed me," Yuna said simply. "But she is not. She's a child," Yuna interrupted. "Too tired to be polite." "That's all that matters." Threnix fell silent. His feathers ruffled in what might have been thought or emotion. By the third week, the ship felt different. The children had transformed the crew quarters into something that felt almost like a home. Dahyun had built them simple toys from spare parts, balls that rolled, blocks that stacked, things that made noise when shaken. The children played with these for hours, making sounds that Yuna recognized as laughter. Chalk had become especially attached to Yuna. He followed her everywhere, imitating her movements, trying to say her name with his different vocal structure. It came out as Yuna, which made everyone smile. Minho found himself teaching Sesseth about the ship. The young Richthan was curious about everything, always asking questions in his limited common. "What this?" he would say, pointing at controls. "How work?" Minho found himself explaining ship operations in the simplest terms possible. Even Dayan, who usually kept to himself, would sit with Krila in the evenings. She was the quiet one, but she watched everything with intelligent eyes. Dahyun would show her his tools and how they worked. She learned quickly, her small hands copying his movements. Ambassador Threnix observed all of this with growing interest. One evening, he found Minho on the bridge during the night cycle. "I must confess something," Threnix said. "When I first boarded your vessel, I thought you humans were foolish, inefficient, emotional in ways that seemed weak. And now?" Minho asked. "Now I am uncertain." Threnix looked at the monitor showing the crew quarters, where all 3 children slept in their special beds, with Yuna asleep in a chair nearby in case they needed her. "My people lay eggs and leave them. The young hatch and care for themselves. We feel no attachment to offspring. It is simply biology. Humans are different," Minho said. "We need connection. We need to care for others. It's how we survived on our world. But these are not your young, not even your species. It doesn't matter whose they are," Minho said. "We help any child." Threnix was quiet for a long time. "Such strange creatures you are," he said finally. "But perhaps not foolish after all." New Haven Station grew larger in the viewport. Soon they would arrive, and they would need to find the children's people. Minho tried not to think about how empty the ship would feel without the sound of small feet running through the corridors, or Chalk's attempts to say new words, or Sess's endless questions. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, the wandering star flew through the quiet dark, carrying its unusual crew toward uncertain futures. In the crew quarters, Chalk made a small sound in his sleep. Yuna's hand moved automatically to pat his head, even though she was asleep herself. And on the bridge, Ambassador Threnix watched the humans care for children, not their own, and wondered what it meant. New Haven Station was 3 times the size of Theta 9, and it bustled with activity from 100 different species. Ships came and went constantly, carrying goods and passengers across the galactic rim. The station's corridors were wide and clean, with signs in 20 languages pointing toward different sectors. Minho docked the wandering star with practiced ease, though his heart felt heavier than usual. The 3-week journey had ended. Now came the hard part, finding where the children belonged. "I've contacted the Richthan embassy," Una said as she helped the children prepare to disembark. She had been quieter than usual all morning. "They're sending someone to collect them." Chalk tugged on her shirt. "Una, stay?" he asked in his halting common. Una knelt down to his level, forcing a smile. "Your people are here, Chalk. They'll take you home." "Home?" Seth asked. He had learned the most common during the journey. "Home where?" "With your own kind," Minho said gently. "With other Richthan." The 3 children looked at each other with uncertainty. They had adapted well to the ship, to the humans, to their new routine. The idea of another change seemed to frighten them. Ambassador Thrinix had already departed to his own people, but not before speaking privately with Minho. "I hope you know what you have done," he said cryptically. "You may have started something you cannot finish." Now, waiting in the station's diplomatic sector, Minho understood what he meant. Magistrate Korn arrived exactly on time. He was Richthan like the children, but larger, with darker scales and more prominent horns. He wore official robes that marked his status and carried himself with rigid formality. "Captain Minho," he said, his voice cold and precise. "I am here to retrieve the juveniles." "They're just inside," Minho gestured toward the ship. "They've been through a lot. They might need time to adjust. That will not be necessary." Korn moved past him without waiting. Minho followed quickly. Something about the magistrate bothered him. Though he could not name what exactly dot in the crew quarters, Una stood with the 3 children. She had dressed them in simple clothes that Doyen had modified to fit their bodies. They looked clean and healthy, so different from the terrified creatures who had hidden in the cargo bay weeks ago. "These are the abandoned juveniles?" Korn asked, looking them over like someone examining damaged cargo. "They're not abandoned," Una said sharply. "They're evacuation ships left without them. We rescued them." "How? Unfortunate." Korn's tone suggested he found it anything but unfortunate. "Well, they appear undamaged. You will release them to my custody immediately." Chalk pressed against Una's leg. Krilla moved behind her brother Seth, who stood protectively in front of both younger siblings. The children's body language screamed fear. "Magistrate," Minho said carefully, "can I ask where you'll be taking them?" "That is not your concern, human." "I think it is. We spent 3 weeks caring for them. We have a right to know they'll be safe." Korn's eyes narrowed. "They will be returned to appropriate Richthan facilities. Now, you will surrender them or I will involve station security." Something was very wrong. Minho had dealt with enough species during his career to recognize when someone was hiding something. Una must have sensed it too, because she did not move. "Give us a moment," Minho said. "We need to say goodbye properly." Before Korn could object, Minho pulled Una aside. "Something's not right." "I know," Una whispered. "Did you see how the children reacted to him? They're terrified, and not just because he's a stranger. It's something else. We need more information before we hand them over. But how? We don't have the right to keep them." A voice interrupted them. "Perhaps I can help with that." They turned to see a human woman in station uniform approaching. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her name badge read, Hana, Station Administrator. "I've been monitoring the situation," Hana said quietly, "and I took the liberty of doing some research." "Magistrate Korn, may I speak with you privately?" Korn looked annoyed but followed Hana to the corridor. Through the open door, Minho could hear parts of their conversation. "Records show these juveniles are from low caste. Bloodlines, that is internal Richthan. Business. Station regulations require proof of guardianship. When they returned, Korn's expression was hostile. The human administrator has inserted herself into matters that do not concern her, he said coldly. However, regulations require I provide documentation before removing juveniles from the station. I will return in 2 cycles with the proper forms. He left, moving with stiff anger. Hana waited until he was gone before speaking. You need to see something. She pulled out a datapad and showed them files. I contacted colleagues in the Richthen sectors. These children are from what their society calls resource-drained bloodlines, families with genetic markers that make them less intelligent, less strong, less useful. That's barbaric, Yuna breathed. It's their culture, Hana said. But here's the disturbing part. When the evacuation happened at Theta 9, Richthen authorities deliberately left these children behind. It was not an accident. They saw it as an opportunity to eliminate resource drains without direct action. Minho felt sick. They were going to let them die. Yes, and now that you saved them, it's become an embarrassment. Korn wants them back to save face, not because anyone actually cares about their welfare. Bem, we can't give them back, Yuna said firmly. It's not that simple. Hana looked troubled. Interspecies law is clear. Children belong with their own species unless extreme circumstances justify intervention. And we don't like their cultural practices usually isn't enough. What if we fought it? Minho asked. Legally, I mean. You could try, but it would be complicated and expensive. You would need a good legal team, evidence of abuse or neglect, and probably testimony from experts about Richthen child development. In the crew quarters, Chalk started crying. Yuna rushed back inside, scooping him into her arms. The small Richthen buried his face against her shoulder. Scared, he said in common. Don't want go, Sesseth approached Minho. We stay with you? He asked hopefully. Stay on ship? I don't know, buddy, Minho said honestly. I don't know if we can. That evening, another human arrived at their ship. He was younger, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. I'm Jinho, he introduced himself. I'm a child psychologist here on the station. Administrator Hana asked me to evaluate the children's emotional state. He spent an hour with the 3 Richthen youngsters, watching how they interacted with the crew, how they responded to questions, how they reacted when Magistrate Korn's name was mentioned. His findings were clear. These children have bonded with your crew, Jinho told them. Removing them now, especially to return them to a culture that sees them as worthless, could cause severe psychological trauma. In my professional opinion, their best interests lie in remaining with you. Can you put that in writing? Minho asked, already done. Jinho handed over a formal report. But I should warn you, this is going to get complicated. The Richthen government won't let this go easily. It's a question of sovereignty and cultural pride. That night, Minho sat on the bridge alone, thinking. He was just a cargo captain. He flew goods from one station to another, made enough credits to keep his ship running, and tried to avoid trouble. He was not equipped to fight governments or challenge cultural practices, but when he closed his eyes, he saw Chalk's small face looking up at Yuna with complete trust. He saw Krilla's quiet intelligence as she learned new things. He saw Sesta's bravery in protecting his younger siblings. Do-hyun climbed onto the bridge, carrying 2 cups of terrible coffee. He handed one to Minho and sat down. You're gonna fight for them, Do-hyun said. It was not a question. I think I have to. It's going to cost us. Time, money, maybe the ship if it goes badly. I know. Do-hyun nodded slowly. Then I guess we're fighting. Yuna appeared in the doorway. Jinho mentioned a human legal advocate on the station who specializes in interspecies rights cases. Her name is Minji. Should I contact her? Minho looked at his small crew. They could walk away right now, hand over the children, claim they did their best, and get back to their regular lives. No one would blame them, but he already knew that was not going to happen. "Contact her," Minho said. "Let's see what we can do." In the crew quarters, the three children slept peacefully, not knowing that the humans they trusted were about to challenge an entire species. Government to keep them safe. Ambassador Threnix had been right. They had started something they might not be able to finish, but they were going to try anyway, because that was what humans did. The arbitration chamber was full. Minho had not expected this many people to care about 3 refugee children, but apparently, the case had caught the galactic community's attention. Representatives from dozens of species filled the observation galleries, their various forms creating a strange rainbow of colors and shapes. Minji, the human legal advocate, had explained it simply: "This is unprecedented. Cross-species custody battles don't happen because most species don't care about other species' young. The fact that you do makes this fascinating to everyone watching." Now Minho sat at the petitioner's table with his crew and Minji, facing the Richten delegation across the chamber. Magistrate Korn had brought 5 other officials, all wearing formal robes, and expressions of cold displeasure. At the high bench sat Arbiter Zeleth, an ancient being from the Eldari species. The Eldari lived for centuries and served as neutral judges in interspecies disputes. Zeleth's crystalline skin refracted light in strange patterns, and their voice echoed with harmonics when they spoke. This tribunal will determine custody of 3 Richten juveniles currently in the care of human Captain Minho and his crew, Zeleth announced. The Richten government claims sovereign right to their citizens. The humans claim the children's safety requires they remain in human custody. Proceed. The Richten representative stood first. He was older than Korn, with elaborate horn decorations that signified high rank. Arbiter Zeleth, this case is simple. These juveniles are Richten citizens. They belong with their own species. The humans have no legal standing, no biological connection, and no right to interfere with Richten internal affairs. The humans saved their lives, Minji countered, standing to address the arbiter. When Richten authorities deliberately abandoned these children during the Theta 9 evacuation, humans risked their own safety to rescue them. For 3 weeks, they provided care without any expectation of reward. Now the Richten government wants them back only to save face, not from genuine concern for their welfare. The Richten representative's scales darkened with anger. "You accuse us of abandonment? These juveniles are from families that failed to reach evacuation points in time. It was unfortunate but not deliberate. I have evidence that says otherwise." Minji activated a holographic display showing evacuation records. These documents show Richten officials received multiple alerts about juveniles left behind. They chose to depart anyway. The chamber filled with whispers. Zeleth raised one crystalline hand for silence. "Why would Richten authorities leave their young?" Zeleth asked. "This requires explanation." Magistrate Korn stood. "The juveniles in question are from bloodlines designated as low contribution. Their genetic markers indicate lower intelligence and productivity. In times of emergency, resources must be allocated to individuals with higher survival and contribution potential." The whispers grew louder. Even species that did not care deeply about offspring found the cold calculation disturbing. "So you admit you left them to die," Minho said, unable to stay quiet. "We made a logical choice based on resource limitations." Korn replied stiffly. "You let children die because you decided they weren't worth saving. They are defective units. They're children." Yuna's voice rang through the chamber. "Not units. Not resources. Children." Zeleth struck a chime for order. "The tribunal recognizes that cultural practices vary significantly across species. What seems logical to one may seem barbaric to another. This is why interspecies law generally favors species sovereignty. However, We will hear all evidence before making a determination. Over the next 2 days, witnesses testified. A journalist named Sumin covered the trial for galactic news networks, and viewership numbers were unprecedented. The case became a phenomenon, with beings across the galaxy watching and debating. Alien witnesses testified about their own species' practices. A Vrelnath commander explained that his people also did not form attachments to individual offspring. A Dithrani merchant described how her species laid eggs in communal pools and never knew their own children. A Korthan soldier stated flatly that his people called weak juveniles as standard practice. This is normal, the Korthan testified. Only humans seem to believe all juveniles deserve protection regardless of quality. Then it was the humans' turn. Dohyun testified about the modifications he made to care for the children. He described building sleeping areas, toys, and tools to make them comfortable. I didn't think about whether they were human or not, he said quietly. I just saw children who needed help. Yuna described the medical challenges of caring for a species she knew nothing about. She showed logs of the 42 hours she stayed awake nursing Krilla through her illness. I was terrified, she admitted. I didn't know if I was doing the right things. But I couldn't just let her suffer. Why? The Richthan representative asked. She was not your offspring. Not even your species. Why risk your health for a defective Richthan juvenile? Yuna looked at him with something between pity and anger. Because she's a child. That's all the reason I need. When it was Minho's turn, he kept his testimony simple. He described the evacuation, the decision to take the children aboard despite the danger, and the journey to New Haven. When asked why he made those choices, he said, because leaving them behind was not an option. Not for us. But you gain nothing, the Richthan representative pressed. You lost time, resources, and now face legal complications. What was the point? The point is that they're alive and safe. That's enough. The representative shook his head. Humans are bizarre. Then Minji called her most important witness, Jinho. The child psychologist Jinho presented his findings with professional clarity. He described the strong bonds the children had formed with the crew. He showed video recordings of their interactions, their body language, their emotional responses. He explained that forcing the children back to a society that viewed them as worthless would likely cause severe psychological damage. In my expert opinion, Jinho concluded, these children are best served by remaining with the humans who saved them, cared for them, and genuinely loved them. Love? The Richthan representative laughed. A meaningless human emotion. These are not the human's genetic offspring. Love across species is illogical. Perhaps, Jinho said calmly, but it's real nonetheless. On the trial's third day, Zeleth made an unusual decision. The tribunal wishes to hear from the juveniles themselves. Magistrate Korn objected. They are too young to provide meaningful testimony. They are old enough to express basic preferences and feelings, Zeleth countered. Bring them forward. The 3 children entered the chamber with Yuna. Seseth walked at the front, trying to look brave. Krilla stayed close to her brother. Chok clutched Yuna's hand tightly. Zeleth's voice became gentler. Young ones, do you understand you are Richthan? That these are your people? Zeleth gestured to Korn and the other Richthan officials. Seseth nodded slowly. We are Richthan, but we don't know them. Do you wish to return to Richthan society? To your home worlds? The 3 children looked at each other. Then Seseth spoke for all of them. Home is the ship. Home is where Minho and Yuna are. Home is where Dohyun makes us things and teaches us. That is home. They do not understand proper Richthan culture, Korn interjected. They have been corrupted by human influence. They understand they're safe, Yuna said fiercely. They understand they're wanted. They understand they matter. Zeleth turned to Chok, the smallest. Young one with the small horns. Do you have something to say? Chalk looked up at the enormous arbiter. His voice was tiny in the big chamber, but his words carried clearly in the silence. Humans have warm hands, he said in halting common, and warm hearts. They saved us when others left us. They fed us when we were hungry. They healed Krilla when she was sick. They are not Richthan, but they love us. The last word, love, seemed to echo through the chamber. The observation galleries erupted in discussion. Beings of 100 species talked, argued, and debated. Suman's cameras captured every moment, broadcasting the scene across the galaxy. Zeleth called for order. This tribunal will recess to consider all testimony. We will reconvene tomorrow for the decision. That night, Minho could not sleep. He walked the corridors of New Haven Station, thinking about the testimony, the evidence, the arguments. Ambassador Thrinix found him in an observation deck, looking out at the stars. I watched the trial, Thrinix said. Your species is quite remarkable. We're just trying to do the right thing. That is what makes you remarkable. Thrinix settled beside him. Most species make decisions based on benefit, on logic, on survival advantage. You make decisions based on feelings, compassion, a sense of what ought to be rather than what is profitable. Is that so strange? In the galaxy? Yes, very strange indeed. Threnix's feathers ruffled thoughtfully. But perhaps the galaxy needs more strangeness. The next day, the tribunal reconvened. The chamber was even more crowded than before. Zeleth took their place at the high bench, their crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights. This tribunal has considered all evidence and testimony, Zeleth announced. We find that while Richthan sovereignty is important, the welfare of juveniles must take precedence. We find that the Richthan government deliberately abandoned these children. We find that the humans have provided excellent care and formed genuine bonds with. 6 months after the trial, the wandering star looked different. The cargo holds were still there, still functional, but one section had been converted into proper living quarters for 3 growing Richthan children. Dohyun had outdone himself with the modifications, creating temperature-controlled spaces, study areas, and even a small recreation room. Sesseth had grown taller, his horns becoming more prominent. He spent most of his time on the bridge with Minho, learning navigation and ship operations. His common had improved dramatically, though he still had an accent that made some words sound like hisses. Krilla remained quiet, but her intelligence showed in everything she did. She had become Doing's shadow in the engine room, learning systems and repairs with focus that impressed even the taciturn engineer. She could now identify problems by sound alone. Her sensitive Richthan hearing picking up irregularities humans might miss. Chuck, still the smallest, had claimed Yuna as his person. He followed her everywhere, chattering constantly in a mix of Richthan and common. He had started teaching the crew some Richthan words, delighted when they stumbled over the pronunciation. You are family now, Chuck had explained seriously one day. Family should speak same language. The trial's verdict had created waves throughout the galaxy. Suman's coverage had made the case famous, and now every news network debated the implications. The phrase Minho had spoken during testimony, it doesn't matter whose. We help any child had become something of a motto among human communities. But the real changes were more profound. Ambassador Thryngix had taken the case back to the Galactic Council, proposing something radical, an interspecies child protection treaty. The initial response was confused resistance. Most species simply could not understand why they would protect offspring not their own. Resources are limited, one Corthan representative argued. Why waste them on juveniles with no genetic connection to us? Thryngix, transformed by what he had witnessed, responded with passion unusual for his kind. Because civilization is not measured by our weapons or our wealth. It is measured by how we treat the vulnerable among us. All of us. The debate had raged for months. Some species refused to participate. Others were cautiously interested. A few, inspired by human example, began examining their own practices toward young. Meanwhile, something unexpected began happening at human stations and settlements. Alien children started appearing, abandoned or endangered by their own societies. A pair of Relnath larvae left to die because they had genetic defects. A Tithrani youngling rejected from the communal pools for being too small. A Korthan infant whose parents had been killed in the war. With no relatives willing to claim it. Every time, humans responded the same way. They helped. New Haven Station became the center of this movement. Administrator Hana had worked with a human educator named Hyan to establish the first official interspecies refuge. It was a sprawling section of the station, modified to accommodate the needs of different species, hot zones for desert dwellers, cold sections for ice world natives, aquatic tanks for water. BREATHERS. Hyan was patient and dedicated, studying each species' needs and building a staff of specialists. "We're learning as we go," she admitted to Minho during one of his visits. "But isn't that what being human is about? Figuring things out because we care." The refuge housed 23 children from 8 different species now. Some would eventually return to their own people once safe arrangements were made. Others, like the 3 Richthan children on the Wandering Star, had found permanent homes with human families. "It's changing the galaxy," Una said one evening, watching a news report about other stations establishing similar refuges. "What we did with Sesith, Krilla, and Chalk. It's becoming a movement." "Humans being humans," Do-Hyun commented from his usual spot in the engine room. "Can't help ourselves." The Richthan government had quietly distanced itself from the case. Too embarrassed to continue fighting, they had not challenged the verdict. But other Richthan, seeing how the 3 children thrived, began questioning their society's practices. A small reform movement had started on the Richthan homeworlds, advocating for better treatment of low-caste children. It was slow progress. But it was progress. One day, a message came through on the ship's communications. It was from the Galactic Council. Minho opened it with curiosity and found himself looking at Ambassador Threnix's feathered face. "Captain Minho," Threnix said formally, though his eyes showed warmth. "I wanted to inform you that after 6 months of debate, the Galactic Council has passed the Interspecies Child Protection Treaty. It establishes basic rights for all sapient juveniles, regardless of species. It creates protocols for rescue and care of endangered young. It recognizes that civilization has obligations to the vulnerable." Minho felt his throat tighten. "This would not have happened without you," Threnix continued. "Without your crew's example. You showed the galaxy something it did not know it needed to see. That compassion need not be limited by species. That the instinct to protect the young is not weakness, but strength. That," Threnix paused, his voice becoming softer. "That love, illogical as it may be, can cross any boundary." The message ended with instructions for a ceremony at the council headquarters. Minho was invited to attend the treaty signing. "Are we going?" Una asked. Minho looked around at his crew, at the 3 Richthan children who were teaching Do-Hyun a game they had invented, at the ship that had become home to such an unlikely family. "We'll see," he said. "Right now, we have a cargo run to finish." But 2 weeks later, as they were completing that cargo run, another emergency signal came through. A mining colony on the outer rim had been hit by raiders. In the chaos, several Korthan younglings had been left behind, their adult caretakers killed or scattered. Yun looked at Minho. Do-Hyun paused his work. Even the 3 Richthan children stopped their game. "Captain," Una said carefully, "that colony is 3 days out of our way. We'd miss our delivery deadline." Minho was already adjusting their course. Contact the colony. Tell them we're coming. The cargo client won't be happy about the delay. Then they can complain. Right now, there are children who need help. Seseth appeared on the bridge. We are going to get the Korthan younglings? Yes. Good. Seseth nodded with satisfaction. It does not matter whose. We help any child. The young Richthan had learned the lesson well. The wandering star changed course, and 3 days later, they arrived at the damaged mining colony. The Korthan younglings were exactly where the distress call had described them, huddled in a shelter, scared and alone. There were 5 of them, ranging from infant to early adolescent. Minho and Yuna had done this enough times now to work efficiently. They assessed the children's immediate needs, provided food and water, and made them comfortable on the ship. Dohim modified the crew quarters again, creating warmer spaces for the heat-loving Korthan. The 3 Richthan children helped with the new arrivals, using their own experiences to comfort the scared Korthan younglings. Chuck, once the most frightened refugee himself, now helped calm a crying Korthan infant with surprising gentleness. It's okay, he said in his halting mix of languages. Humans help. Humans keep safe. Word of their rescue spread. Other ships started following the Wandering Star's example. When they encountered endangered children, they stopped to help. Human stations became known as safe havens for any young being in need. Some aliens still did not understand. They asked the same questions Velcros had asked during that first evacuation. Why risk yourselves for offspring not your own? But more and more, other species began to see the value. They watched abandoned children thrive under human care. They saw societies begin to question practices that left their young vulnerable. They witnessed the beginning of something new in the galaxy. The idea that all children mattered. Months turned into a year. The Wandering Star continued its cargo runs, but everyone knew that schedule would change the moment another child needed help. The ship had become famous, featured in news reports across the galaxy. Other crews, both human and alien, started similar rescue operations. The movement had a name now, the Warm Hands Initiative, named after Chalk's simple observation about humans. Dozens of refuges opened on stations throughout colonized space. The treaty ambassador Threnix had championed continued to evolve, with more species signing on. Even some Richthan had changed. A delegation arrived at New Haven Station one day, asking to visit Seseth, Krila, and Chalk. These were reformers from the homeworlds, who wanted to see how the children had developed. My NHO watched carefully as the adult Richthan met with the 3 youngsters. The children were nervous at first, but Seseth spoke bravely about their life on the ship. Krila demonstrated the engineering skills she had learned. Chalk simply said, "We are happy." The visiting Richthan looked at each other with something that might have been shame. "We failed you," their leader said quietly. "Our society failed you, but you have flourished despite us." "Because of humans," Seseth said proudly. "They did not fail us." The visit ended with the Richthan reformers asking if they could study the human approach to child welfare. They wanted to bring changes to their own worlds, to ensure no more children would be abandoned as Seseth, Krilla, and Chalk had been. It was, Minho thought, exactly the kind of change the galaxy needed.